get it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker, and joining me today is a man that's going to be taking the stage in just a little bit over a week now, May 17th. He has a record of 11-0 with 6 KOs. That's the Liddard bomber, George Liddard. George, appreciate you come on today, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. I'm very excited for next week, as you can imagine.
Absolutely.
And yeah, good to chat to you today.
Absolutely, man. Well, first of all, like you said, you're just about over a week now, about a little bit over 7 days until you're mistaken back into the ring. What's the emotions? What's the thoughts going through you right now?
Just pure excitement, to be honest. I'm getting experience now, 11 fights into the career. Um, and we're pushing on fight after fight. I feel like I'm, up in the levels in opponent, and I can't wait for next week. Standout performance, and it's going to put me on some big things at the end of the year.
Well, I want to ask you something before we get into this upcoming fight, and that's your nickname, the Liddard Bomber. You gotta take us to the nickname behind that. How did that come to be? How did you get that nickname?
So Billericay is my hometown, and it just kind of stuck. When I first started, as a pro at Tony's gym, he used to always call me. He used to say like the Billericay Bulldozer, Billericay Bomber. There was a few floating about, and then
Okay.
a few of my mates started calling me the Billericay Bomber, and I started knocking a few out, and it's just kind of stuck since. I've got, a lot of people that I spar. They're always like, you got such hard hands, you punch very hard, so. The
Okay.
Billericay Bomber just kind of stuck.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into this fight because, as I said, you've been pretty active overall the past year or so, and now you go up against a guy, 19-1, Aaron Sutton. Walk us through your opponent so far, from what you've broken down, your knowledge of him. What's your thoughts on your opponent?
Look, there's not too much out there on him,
Okay.
like video analysis wise.
Sure.
I've checked out the record, checked out a few of the opponents, but for me, it's about being the best version of me on fight night. As you can see with many fights, people turn up, their style change. A few of my fights already, I've been expecting one type of fight, and they've come a completely different style. So I
Sure.
think the best way to be is adaptable, and make sure that the best George Liddard is there next Saturday night, and then whatever comes at me, I'm ready for. But look, he's 19 wins, one loss. To have a record like that, you got to be half decent, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's up to me to put in a good performance and get the job done in style.
With you being now a week out, what's your prediction for the fight? How do you see it going down?
Look, I don't like to do too many predictions, things like that. I
Sure.
just let it kind of play out. It's going to play out, but I've trained very hard. I've left no stone unturned. I've pushed my body to the max. Week in,
Okay.
week out. So I'm expecting a very dominant performance. And look, if it happens inside the distance, which when I come to fight, that's no shock to anyone, as we've seen from a few of my finishes. I
Yeah.
do carry good power in both hands. But I don't go looking for it. If it comes, it comes, and you'll see next Saturday night. You know, I'm confident that we can get the job done inside the distance, but we'll see.
So when you talk about what you would like people to think about afterwards, when you say, okay, George Liddard, hopefully he's 12-0 moving in after that fight, what's the statement you want to make on Saturday? What's the statement that you want people to take away from that saying, okay, George Liddard is this?
I think for me in my career, it's about being known as the guy that, not afraid to step up fast, take the opportunities, and take good fights from
Okay.
early in my career. If you look at my record, I've never shied away from a challenge. I've boxed some fights where people might have said that was quite early, and we've come through it and got the win. So for me, look, win this fight. It's a British title eliminator. I've got the Commonwealth, so I'm pretty much mandatory near enough for both of them. Let's get the British and Commonwealth title next. I'm not overlooking anyone, but when we go 12-0 next Saturday, that's going to be my goal for the fight after.
That is a huge aspect because, as you said, this is an eliminator for the British middleweight title. It's a huge accomplishment to possibly get that, especially at your age, being only 22 years old. So I know at that point, probably be 23, I think it will be. So you talk about just this aspect of knowing that you're very, very close to getting a massive milestone. The British middleweight title would be huge. Is that what you want to accomplish, by the end of this year at least? Is that something that you would hope to be able to be fighting for?
100%. By the end of this year, I do believe I will be sitting here British and Commonwealth champion.
Okay.
And, I don't doubt that for 1 second. So now it's just my turn to obviously prove it next Saturday night, put on a good performance, and get myself into the position where, those are the fights that everyone's saying that's what he needs next.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you look at the next 12, 18 months of outline, I know obviously you said by the end of this year you hope to be have both those titles underneath your name, but let's say the next 12 to 18 months for yourself. Where do you see yourself? What do you want to accomplish in terms of the amount of fights? What awards, recognitions? Like, where do you see yourself 12 to 18 months from today?
I think, look, if we look for, 4 fights in the next, 12 to 18 months, we're stepping up now. This is a 10 rounder. Win this, obviously, the next one will plan to be a 12 rounder. And then,
Yeah.
I don't plan on dropping back then. It stays at 12 rounders. So, if those camps, they're brutal, you need to have good rest and then a great camp for the fight. So I think 4 to 5 fights in the next 12 to 18 months is more than reasonable. And yeah, I want to go at a good pace. I want to keep stepping up. Like you say, I am only 22, turning
Yeah.
23 this month. I've got plenty of time, and where I've stepped up quite quick. If we pick up the British and Commonwealth, I think it'd be good to kind of maybe sit there, defend it a couple of times, and then look
Mhm.
to march on.
You being 22 years old, I think there's a unique portion about that because we look over at the UK, an era in a sense is kind of going away now. We talk about Tyson Fury. You talk about obviously Anthony Joshua. There's a lot of guys that are getting older, but there's this new generation that's up and coming right now. And the young future is obviously very bright. Obviously, you guys haven't accomplished all these great things yet, but the future is bright. I know most people, notably around the world, Namosi Toma, he's obviously going to be great at the heavyweight division. We've got yourself in the mix. We've got a lot of different guys. When you talk about being one of those guys that people are starting to throw your name out there as being one of the next guys, the next era of British boxing. What does that mean to you? And does that bring any pressure alongside that?
There's no pressure, more excitement,
Okay.
and I do believe at middleweight I can be that guy, the
All right.
next flag bearer for our country, the next person to, bring big, big nights to the middleweight
Mm-hmm.
division in Britain. So I'm excited, I don't take it as pressure, I take it as an opportunity. Life's full of these things, it's opportunities, and you got to take them. You got to
Yeah.
jump at them. Get one shot at this,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, age means nothing. It's about experience in the gym, experience fighting, and I was a good amateur, and I've been around some great pros in my time as a pro. So I have no doubt that my experience and my level of my skill and my
Sure.
will to be someone in this sport will get me there.
If I were to ask you for your top 5 British prospects under the age of 25, obviously you include your name in that group as well. Who do you think's in that group?
I think you got to back yourself. I put
Yep.
myself there. Obviously, you said one. I think Moses Toma, great talent. Um, just Giorgio Visioli, another
Mm-hmm.
one. Jimmy Sains out of my gym, good fight. If we're talking British, I think we're the next kind of generation coming through.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who's like 25 and under because it's a bit of a tricky one. I'm not good at guessing ages. I don't know exactly,
Well,
but
let's just say young
it's
then. I guess if that makes it easier, we could say just younger
yeah.
guys.
I think you got to back the lads coming through from the local area for us. Essex and London, we've got a wealth of good lads. You see the
Mm-hmm.
shows we're doing, the next gen, this show coming up next Saturday. You got to look at the prospects on these shows and myself, the contenders, as the
Yeah.
next lot that are coming through. So
Well, going back onto the card that you're going to be fighting on, Fisher Allen, I got to hear your prediction for that one. I know it's obviously a highly anticipated main event. When you talk about that fight, if you were to make a prediction right now, who do you have winning that fight?
it's a very tough one for me. Look, I'm friends with Johnny. Johnny's a great
Okay.
guy, and he's obviously local to the area for me. So I've got to
Sure.
back my guy Johnny in it. You know what I mean? But
Uh-huh.
tough fight. And he's jumped straight back into it. So big
Yep.
hats off to him. Big
Agree.
respect because that was a very tough first fight between them two, and a very close fight too. So he's not giving himself loads of time,
Yep.
but Johnny's got a good heart, and I think we're going to see an even better Johnny second time round, and I really hope he can do the job.
All right. Well, you talked about one interesting aspect, and that is that you might be very young, but you have lots of experience. And I think, like you said, when you talk about experience, that means more than just the age. Age is just a number. And I want to talk about your career a little bit because we go all the way back, though. You're a 4-time national champion in the amateurs. You've had an incredible amateur career leading up to your pro career. But I want to go all the way back, though. When you talk about first getting into boxing, was this your first love? Was there other sports involved, or how'd you get into boxing?
So look, as a kid, I was like anyone, I liked football or
Yeah.
soccer, as you call it.
Yeah.
I played a bit of rugby,
Mhm.
and I actually did a bit of karate for some time too,
Okay.
but I kind of fell out of love with that because there was no kind of contact as such. And then my dad's, been a boxing fan all his life, boxed when he
Okay.
was young, not professionally or anything, but like just loved boxing. So when I fell into that kind of sport, it was almost like destiny in a way.
Mm,
He got behind me. I could tell there was a different love and a different support from him with the boxing than other sports, because
sure.
it was a sport he loved so much. And yeah, like I say, I started when I was only very young. Started at an amateur gym when I was just 8. So I've been around gyms, what feels like all my life, and been around boxing. So yeah, from young I learned to box, and I think the experience I had in the amateurs, I boxed over a fair few different countries, boxed many different styles, and
Mm,
even national titles. But I made like 3 other finals that I didn't quite get the gold, made the semis, So I was
mhm,
always at the top level of the sport. Never quite got my chance on like the proper international stage, Europeans, Worlds, due to COVID. I was meant to go to the
mhm.
Europeans and the Youth Worlds, but I shared a lot of rounds with a lot of good amateurs from different countries, GB lads. So I think that experience has carried me through to the pros, and to join a gym like Tony's,
Yeah.
being around many world champions, many British champions, European champions, and a lot of people come to our gym for sparring, so I've witnessed a lot of high level sparring, and took part in a lot of high level sparring. John Ryder,
Yep.
been in with Canelo, Munguia, great wins, who he like in his career as well. He had
Mhm.
Spider Richards, world level light heavyweight, lost in a
Yep.
close fight to Bivol. You look at people like that, and I'm sharing the ring, getting experience from them. So
Mhm.
definitely helped me mature. What I thought at a young age.
At what point in your life did you start to realize that this wasn't just a something that you love doing, but this is something that you can be very successful in? Was that pretty early on, or when did that really start clicking for you?
For me, like when I was young, I was like, I loved the sport and I trained all the time, but I fell a bit in and out of love with it at times. I think where I
Mhm.
did it from such a young age, it's like anything, when you go, 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 no stop, you get to a
Fair.
point where it's like, I need a break. And I had that. But I think it was probably about 15, 16. I started winning back to back national titles. I think the confidence just went to a new level, and it was like, hang on, I could actually do something here. I could
Alright.
actually, be a professional boxer in the future. And I think when I got picked for it all kind of hit a brick wall again when COVID came, because I was meant
Mhm.
to go to the Europeans, ended up sat at home watching them go ahead to take a team. So that for me, it was a real, brick wall as such with motivation, and I fell out of love with it for a little bit. And then
Mhm.
I thought I got to like 18, and I was like, what am I going to do in my life? What do I want? And I want to be someone great.
Mm.
And that was around that time as well that I found my faith. I found my relationship with Jesus, and
Love
from
that.
there, I dedicated my life to that and to boxing. And listen, it's never a perfect straight road. You hit bumps and you lose your faith and things like that at times. But I can confidently sit here say now that without those two things, my life would be very different. So I can't actually imagine life without it.
I love that, man. We're gonna piggyback right off that question right there because obviously has a huge portion for my life as well. And so I wanted to ask you about that aspect because you said, I think some people may grow up in a Christian household or whatever it might be, but then there's that point where you have your own personal relationship. And like you said, that ended up being in your adult ages when you're 18, 19 years old. How much has that changed your life now that you've discovered and really grown that relationship with him?
Well, I never really grew up in like a Christian household. Like my mum
Okay.
was baptized when she was a child,
Sure.
but it wasn't really talked about, in our house. But I kind of found it myself, I guess, when
Okay.
I was going through a relatively rough time, like I say, in lockdown, hit some
Hmm.
real, mental battles and things like that. And I can't really say the exact moment that it kind of clicked, but I
Sure.
just remember kind of praying to something as such, and I didn't
Sure.
really know have a relationship with Jesus or God at the time. So when I was praying to something, I was like, "Please help me, help." me stop having these mental battles, helped me, feel
Yeah.
okay again. And I kind of stumbled across a couple videos. I think it was like TikTok at the time, something like that.
Mhm.
I stumbled across a couple videos about it, and I was like, wow, this I believe in this. I really believe
Mhm.
this could change my life. And from then on, I found myself, praying in tough times. But then it was also starting to give thanks. I was like, wow, thank you, God, thank you for doing
Mm.
this. And my life just changed from there. It felt like everything almost got easier,
Yeah.
bad times and the good times, because it was like, hang on, this is all happening for a reason. This was planned for
Mm.
me. You know, I didn't look at everything so negative anymore. It was almost like everything happens for a reason. And yeah, I guess I had some good people around me when I turned pro. My mindset coach, Greg Meehan, he kind of like introduced me into coming into going to church because I was praying at that time and I was
Okay.
like, I believed, but
Mhm.
I didn't go to church, things like that. And then, I started attending and I was like, wow, I just feel a lot better. I'd go on
Mm.
Sunday morning and it'd feel like a good way to start my next week. I felt
Yeah.
like I had structure. So definitely helped me in my life for sure. It's changed my life. It's changed the way I look at things. So I
Yeah.
think, a lot of people could really benefit from it. Just having that faith and believing that, you know, everything kind of happens for a reason and it's God's, not ours.
I love that because the other aspect too I want to ask you about is that you're obviously very outspoken about your faith. Now you're talking about that. That's not what a lot of people would want to go out there and do. Some people keep it more quiet, a little bit more closeted. What about you has led you to say, you know what, I want to be outspoken. I want to be bold about my faith and let others know about him.
I want more people to come to Christ and to feel what I felt, in my heart,
Mm.
that like that peace, that everything is going to be okay,
Mhm.
and that God loves me. And I feel like a lot of people lack that in today's world. I think once they feel the love of God and they feel that God's got a plan for them, life just becomes that bit better.
Yeah.
So I think the reason I'm so outspoken about it is because I want more people to feel the way I feel. And we all listen, we all hit our little battles and our little roadblocks, but I feel like God also helps give you the guidance to get around them and to get over them.
Yep. Absolutely,
So
man. Well, I want to get into one of those tough situations you were talking about a little bit deeper because one of which is that you talk about you're going to be a part of Team England. COVID hits in for you guys, caused a lot of uncertainty for yourself in your life. And I know when I was doing some research, I believe you ended up working with your dad at a windscreen company too during that time
yeah, yeah.
span. Walk us through just that life because that'd be difficult. Like you're this great amateur career. You obviously have your eyes set on big things right now, being on kind of finale of your amateur career, and then COVID sets in, and that impacts obviously everyone around the world. You have your story here. Walk us through just what exactly that time period of life was like.
It was crazy.
Yeah,
And credit to my dad for obviously helping me get a job because at the time there wasn't really any work going on, but this
yeah,
was like kind of essential work because obviously delivery drives, ambulances, they all needed the windscreens, right? So I
yep,
managed to get a job which a lot of people couldn't, so I'm very fortunate for that. I was doing it and it just when I was going to work, it was fine for a while because you're making
mhm,
money. It feels great. I was only like 18, 19.
yeah,
But you just get to that point where it's like, this isn't what I want with my life. I
yeah,
feel like I was destined to do something else. Um, I was going out at the weekends. Obviously, this was as lockdown was lifting. So like
mhm,
people were starting to go out, things like that. I'd obviously turned 18 in lockdown. So I'd never really been out. And then I started going out, started partying, and it got to a point where I seemed like this happy guy and I seemed like I was having a great time. But every time I got home from being out and I was on my own, I sat there and I was like, this just isn't for me.
mhm,
There's more for me in life than this. And I was lucky enough I met a great partner who I'm still with now, and I think that helped me settle too. And I realized I want more from my life than this, just living for the
mhm,
weekend and living to party and listen, that's some people's life, and I'm not discrediting that or anything, but I do
sure,
believe I was destined for more. I believe I was meant to also change other people's lives. That's all I want to do, give my family the best life they can, my partner. and I want to help guide, some of the younger people through. Like, if I can do it, why can't they?
Mm.
If I go win a world title, people will see that and be like, wow, he really did what he set out to do. I'm not from a big town. I'm not from a big
Mhm.
town. So people are watching, and I'd love to inspire the next generation to, take that risk, take that opportunity, and don't be afraid.
Yeah.
You've always got time to rebuild.
You know what I love about the British overall landscape in boxing is you just have kind of these different belts you can work up your way up to, and you can kind of create notoriety locally, and obviously build up domestically, and then you take the world jump. Obviously, America's a little bit different. People are taking the world jump right away and stuff like that. But for you guys out there, you get this situation where you become role models for guys at a younger age than you probably do in other countries. And that should be unique because you're already having the Commonwealth silver middleweight title holder. You've accomplished a lot already at your age, knowing that you already have this platform, you have this where so many kids are already looking up to you. What does that mean to you?
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I was that young lad before. Looking up to
Yep.
some of these good domestic fighters, and for me to be that, that's a dream come true.
Mhm.
Like you say, won the Commonwealth silver. I did try to pick up the Southern area a couple fights ago. Tried to get a fight for the English, but none of the fights came off. But you can only
Mhm.
do what you can do, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the second I got the opportunity to fight for the Commonwealth silver, it was like, sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm there. Any chance just to get a belt, because those are the things that stick. Everyone can be unbeaten and things like this, but it's your accomplishments, right?
Mhm.
Accomplishments that people look back on. So I want to win as much as I can, gain as much experience, and have as much to show, my future children I can. And obviously, these are all the experience, right? That 10 rounds that I did for the Commonwealth Silver is a hard fought 10 rounds, which is only going to serve me, as a purpose. It's going to be great experience for me going into my next 10 round fight.
Mhm.
So these smaller belts that some people overlook, it's a really good gateway, into the bigger belts. It just gives you that experience rather than jumping straight in at maybe 3 levels higher than what you boxed at before.
Yeah.
I'm building level on level.
And that's obviously got to be a large credit to what Matchroom's done for you guys as well. And so I want to ask you about that component because we know Eddie Hearn and the group out there and what they've been able to build with countless fighters now. You're now one of the top rising prospects within their stable house. So walk us through that aspect. How do they kind of plan this out for you, and what's your relationship like with them?
Yeah, Matchroom have, been a great part of my early career.
Mhm.
I've got a chance to box on some amazing shows, great experience. I boxed on an AJ card, I've boxed in Vegas, which
Yep.
was one hell of an experience. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to box on the big stages from so early on in my career, which I know some people aren't as fortunate to have. So that's what I talk about when I talk about experience, and
Mhm.
hats off to them and my team for, give me those experiences and helping build me as a fighter, because there's all different components to this game. Fighting is just one part of it. Dealing
Yeah.
with the media, dealing with the press conferences, the public workouts, the public weigh-ins. It can be daunting for some fighters, but luckily, where I've had the experience of that from so early in my career, at just 20 years old, made my debut at Wembley Arena, which is like, holds about 12,000, and it was on
Mhm.
the card. So I've been very fortunate, and that's the experience that I say now. Like headlining the last show, it didn't really phase me, because
Mhm.
I'm used to those lights and I thrive off of them, if anything. So yeah, credit to Matchroom, and we just signed a new contract with them,
Yep.
multi-fight deal, so they're going to be promoting my next few fights. And I'd love to work with them going forward. There, I think they've done good things for me.
I was going to actually ask you about that. First of all, congratulations on like contract fight extension there, first of all. But adding on to that, I'm sure you've had discussions with them and you kind of gave outline plans for what you want to accomplish going forward. What do they have in store for you? When you talk to Eddie Hearn, you talk to different people that you're dealing with out there. What do they have plans for you, and how high are they, do you think, on you going forward now?
Yeah, look, I think the plan is win this, and then
Hmm.
we look for the British and Commonwealth at the end of the year.
Okay.
I think their plan for me is to, pick up all the domestic titles, and then, like we say, I'm young, so I think you can build me into, the European, the other belts around, so a couple of maybe international ranking belts,
Sure.
and then before we push on to the world level, because yeah, I've got so much time. It's like,
Yeah.
why not pick up as many belts as I can for one? And who knows how long I'm going to be a middleweight?
Yeah.
It may only be a couple more fights. It may be longer, but
Mhm.
like I say, 22, I've still probably got a bit more filling out to do in the next few
Yeah.
years. So the plan might change, as with anything, plans can change. But from what I see, Matchroom, seem to be heavily behind me, and they want to see me do good things. So I like the way that they're building my career, at this point in time.
You said the key point there. You're at middleweight right now, but you're 22 years old. You could move up. Do you have any idea, like, if you were to say, when you're in your prime self, your peak self, 27, 20, 30 years old, those kind of ranges there, do you see yourself being more so in, at 168, 175? Is that kind of the range you're looking at? Where do you see yourself eventually kind of suiting down and kind of making that your division?
For sure, I think 160 is good for now, and
Hmm.
I know I'd imagine the next couple of years should be fine. But as you
Yeah.
start hitting 24, 25, I think you're definitely going to see me move up to 168,
Okay.
and hopefully, in the future, I'll potentially even be able to go up to 175. So
All right.
the you know the more weights I can fight over my career, the better, because hopefully the more titles I can pick up and
Good
the
point.
bigger fights I can be in, to box
Hmm.
the best of the best at multiple weights.
We've kind of brushed over it a little bit though, but I also want to ask you about the transition from amateur to the pro ranks because, as I said, for some people that's easy, some people it's not because obviously it's similarities, but there's still a lot of differences between the two. For you, the transition has been pretty seamless. It seems like you've gone right from being great at amateur to being a really, really good pro. Was the transition easy for you, or how would you say that transition went?
Look, I'd be lying if I said it was easy. There was days where it was very
Yeah,
tough, and you think this is different,
yeah,
but where I was so young, I think I was easily moldable. My coaches, at the time in the gym, Tony Sims, I had Kevin Mitchell as well. Kevin Mitchell was a great pro, so having them overseeing me and developing me into a pro style. At first, I was a bit like, "What's this about?" I feel like I'm a bit slow on my feet. I feel like everything's a little bit slower, but
sure.
it was a process. I almost had to be stripped back down to bare basics and then work on everything again. So it
Mm,
was a challenging time, and we spent a good, I think 8 to 10 months in the gym before I made my debut. But
okay.
the changes were evident. Even from my debut, I was punching harder. I had that spitefulness that you need as a pro, and you
Hmm.
know, fight on fight. We've worked on little mistakes that I may have made, and I think, like you say, I feel like I've developed into a pro quite quickly.
Hmm.
But I think it just comes from being in such a experienced professional gym. If I'd
Yep.
have been in a gym that maybe didn't have such experienced pros around, such experienced coaches, could have been different. So credit to my team and the people around me for getting me in such good shape.
Well, let's get into Tony Sims' gym a little bit more because he obviously is a trainer for Conor Ben. We all know who that guy is. Obviously, he's trained Dor Cardina. I know you worked out with
Yeah.
him a lot, and the list goes on. This gym is incredible. You talk about when you talk about being this guy that when you're walking in there 18, 19, 20 years old, all up to this point now, and you get to go spar against these guys and get to know and train alongside guys that have accomplished what Conor Ben has, Joe Cordina, etc. What has been the impact, and what would you say actually is the most important thing, the biggest thing you've learned from some of those guys?
Oh, I've learned so much just from watching
Mhm.
them and having conversations with them. I think seeing the work rate, the work that it takes to get to the world level, to get to those big fights, that's done
Yeah.
nothing but motivate me. It's like, right, if I work like this, I can get there too. Um,
Hmm.
just little things, coming up to fights, little questions, anything I've had, things like weight, what to eat,
Mm.
how to recover. I think learning off of those fighters has been incredible. And it's something money cannot buy. I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity in the matchroom gym, and I'm very grateful for it. And I think it's made me the fighter I am now, because there's so much to this game. It's not just about turning up on the night and fighting. It's all about the preparation. The mental side of things, the recovery, the nutrition. There's so much
Mhm.
that goes into this, and I can confidently sit here now and from learning from those guys, from the team I've got around me, I leave no stone unturned. I live my life like a true professional at this. I'm not a part timer. I
Mhm.
dedicate my life to this sport.
There was a story when I was reading about how you got into Tony Sims' gym, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll just go a little bit deeper into the story. But I believe you were just being called in there to spar one day, and ended up you performing quite well, and then the rest is history in terms of your matchroom deal and everything comes on after that. Is that true? And if so, just kind of elaborate on how that all happened.
Yeah, so the first time Tony texted me was, I think it was just before Christmas, and I had COVID at the time, funnily enough, so
Okay.
I couldn't go and spar. And then he asked me again, and I just got off of a family holiday, and he was like, "I need you for rounds for John Ryder for the Danny Jacobs fight that was," and I was
Okay.
like, "I can't say no again." Like I just come back off holiday. I was a little bit out of shape. I wasn't in the best shape. I was like, can't say no again. This opportunity might never
Hmm.
come. So turned up, got the rounds in. Then I got called back again for the Wednesday. I think this was the Monday or the
Okay.
Wednesday, and then I got called back a couple of days later to get some sparring again, and end up sparring him and John Ryder and Felix Cash. And yeah, I must have performed relatively well because I text Tony and he must have had his eye on me potentially from watching a few of my fights in the amateurs. And I said that
Hmm.
I was looking to turn pro. And he said, come down, see how you get on. And I've been there since. So I must be
All
doing
right.
something all right. I am going to actually
Absolutely,
have to
man.
run upstairs with you though because my phone's just. I didn't realize
Oh,
how
no
much
worries.
battery this live stream was going to take. It was going to take out of my phone.
Oh, no
Two
worries, man. No worries
seconds.
at all.
Just running you
Well,
upstairs with me.
okay, no problem at all. So I also
Sorry
was
about
going
that.
to ask you though, because I feel like I know the answer to what you're going to answer this question with, but you've had some great KOs in your career, six to be specific. Do you have a favorite KO to this point?
Oh, that's a yeah. I think there's got to be one, right? It gets posted about 3 times every camp.
Yeah.
There's the George Davey knockout in my, I
Yeah.
believe it was my ninth fight in Sheffield. That
Hmm.
for me is probably the best knockout of my career so far. I think due to the caliber of the opposition as well. He was
Yeah.
arguably another prospect coming out of England.
Hmm.
So so yeah, that win was it made it that much sweeter, to win it the way I did. So to that decisively, yeah, that's
Hmm.
definitely the highlight of my career so far.
Well, you also got to take us through that whole knockout because the way you set up was brilliant, and obviously the finish was incredible as well. Can you just take us through that when you're in that mode and you have one of those that's going to be a career highlight reel? That's probably going to be a KO that when your career is all done, people will still be remembering that KO there. Is that just walk us through that you set that punch off, you land it all up. Just take us through that setup and just what was going through your mind before you landed it.
Yeah, so I feel like I set that punch up from round one. I was touching to the
Hmm.
body, touching to the head with a jab. Um, and the game plan was, to put that right hand on him at some point. And when I did, it came off sweet. I kept jabbing that to the body, and I kept seeing a reaction. And
Hmm.
that round, it just so happened that as I jabbed to the body, I've seen him come to throw the right back, and I knew something was going to come back before I threw it, which is why I put my whole body through that right hand, and
Yeah.
when it landed, yeah, it landed sweet. So it wasn't just a lucky right hand;
Yeah.
there was some thought behind it. So.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we've been drilling that shot, for most of the camp.
Well, we've got a couple of things I want to wrap up before I wrap you up with you, George, and one of which is your most recent fight. You had a fight just a few months ago, and that fight, in my opinion, the scorecards were a little bit too close. In my opinion, I think they should have been a little bit
I'm glad
more
you
spread apart.
agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, it is
Yeah.
what it is. You got the win. That's all that matters at the end of the day. But when you just talk about that fight, it was a great performance, in my opinion, top to bottom. What do you feel like you learned and gained from that fight?
I feel like I learned a lot from that fight. It was arguably probably the toughest fight of my career to date. I've
Hmm.
been in a couple other wars like that, but that was definitely, my first time doing the 10 rounds. I'd
Yeah.
never been past six before, so it was, a very good test, and I passed it.
Hmm.
Like you say, I feel like the scorecards were a little bit close. I feel like
Yeah.
my, smart boxing and my defense was a little bit maybe overlooked at times by the judges, but it's one of those things, they saw what they saw, but I come out victorious. That's all that matters.
Hmm.
But I feel like I learned a lot of, I feel like I learned the art of patience a little bit as well because I feel like sometimes I did rush my work. I was,
Okay.
I was excited to throw as such, rather than maybe setting up some of my work. But that was 6 weeks after I had my first scheduled 10 rounder. It only went around, but again, those back-to-back training camps, it's not the fights that take it out of you. It was the training camp. So,
Hmm.
I think going into that fight, was it the best for me? Potentially not. I think I
Okay.
had a couple of not injuries, but a few things, playing on my mind, and
Sure.
with little kind of niggles as such, they call them. But yeah, no excuses. I won. That's all that matters.
Yep.
So, but yeah, definitely picked up on a few things that I could work on from that fight, which is, always a positive.
Do you feel that the version that we're going to see of George Liddard in 1 week from now, May 17th, is this going to be the best version of yourself?
100%. Yeah, I've prepared, diligently for this fight. I've been locked in. I've pushed my body to the limit day in, day
Mhm.
out now for weeks. So, time I'm rested up, refueled, rehydrated up.
All
I'm
right.
looking forward to it. I genuinely cannot wait. I can't wait to put on a masterclass, and show the domestic division I'm here to take over.
Love it, man. Well, I got one final question for you, George. It's a question I like wrapping up every single interview with. Let's talk about your legacy. We've already talked about, we know you got a long boxing career ahead of you, but when that day does come, you put down the gloves. What is it you want everybody to remember George Liddard for, both what you did in the ring, outside the ring? What do you want your legacy to be?
I want to be, the man that never shied away from a challenge,
Hmm.
take on all comers. Obviously, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to be an undisputed world champion,
Yeah.
at least at one weight.
All
Um,
right.
but I want to be a flag bearer for Britain. I want to be known as one of the best to have done it out of Britain. And there's some big shoes to fill. We've had some great fighters over the years. But,
Hmm.
I do believe with the skill I have, and, the dedication to this game, I do believe I have what it takes, but it's up to me to prove it, and I will do. I will do, all in due time. It's God's plan.
Absolutely, man. Well, George, best luck coming five. Make sure to tune in May 17th on the Fisher Allen card to see George Liddard return. I appreciate you having to come on in, man. Can't wait to see what God's got in store for you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. God bless you.
Absolutely, man. You're always welcome on. God bless you as well, George.
Thank you. Thank you. All the best. Thanks for having me.
Yep, no problem, man. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Cheers. Bye.
Appreciate everyone for tuning into that interview. I'll get that clipped up and edited out very, very shortly after the show is done. So you guys can go check the full interview. I'm going to go on a quick commercial break and then we'll get back into the rest of the show. See you guys shortly. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker. We're going to have two different segments planned for the remainder of this show. First up will be a preview of what to expect this weekend with a lot of fights going down. The second half will be breaking down some other news and information for you guys to get to know. So with that being said, as I said, we have a preview coming up now. What's going to be going down this weekend in boxing. It's nowhere near the scale which last weekend was in terms of all the big names, but there still are lots of good fights. And there's cards. There's a couple of decent ones tonight on Friday, a couple on Saturday, and then at least my time Sunday, it'll be about early morning Sunday, but we'll have one out there in Japan. I'm going to be breaking down just the big line names there because there's so many cards, too many fights to break down. So what I'm going to be doing right now is we're going to go through some of the big fights. We're breaking down the Anthony Kakase versus Lee Wood fight. I'll be breaking down Liam Davies versus Kurt Walker, Emmanuel Navarrete, Charlie Suarez, Raymond Murataya versus Zora Abdulov. We'll be talking about Andres Cortez's fight, Erickson Lubin, Fernando Martinez will be the final one. So I'm going to get through those breakdowns for you guys right now. And following that, then we'll get into a break and then get into some boxing news. Let's get right to it, though. First and foremost, we have a fight upcoming on Saturday, Anthony Kakase versus Lee Wood. This is a unique fight because for those that forget, Anthony Kakase was the world champion. He was the IBF former world champion. He vacated his belt because for a couple of different reasons, but he wanted this fight against Lee Wood. Now, this is going to be an interesting fight for the featherweight division. For Kakase, he's known for his great counters, his durability. We know he's been in a very, very good run over the past year and a half. He's had an exceptional run as a world champion, but as I said, he vacated it. As for Lee Wood, he's moving up from featherweight. He's famous for dramatic knockouts. He's obviously had a great career. It'll be interesting to see what he does at this next level. When you talk about this, both fighters do have a similar trait. Both guys have come away from beating Josh Warrington in the past, which is a quite interesting aspect there. Now, the biggest thing will be, can Lee Wood move weight up? Will his power carry over with his weight? That's going to be the most interesting facet to see about this fight. When we talk about what I think is going to happen in this fight, though, I do have Anthony Kakase winning this fight. I think the way that he's performed over the past couple of years has been exceptional. He's done his job. He was a good champion. With him now moving up here with Lee Wood, I think that he's going to be able to come away with the victory by decision. I don't see it being by KO. Lee Wood would, if a KO happens in this fight, it likely would be by Lee Wood. But I do see Anthony Kakase coming away with the victory here by decision. The other fight on the undercard, Liam Davies versus Kurt Walker. Liam Davies was obviously a guy on the rise. He had a very, very, tough fight in his last fight. He's going to be looking to get his revenge in this upcoming fight now against Kurt Walker. Kurt Walker is an undefeated prospect. He is a solid fighter. I honestly am pretty high on him. I think he's a good fighter. He's an Olympic amateur. He's had a good overall career to this point. What I'm interested in, though, is seeing how does Liam Davies back up? If I were to make a prediction, I do have Liam Davies winning this fight. At the same time, though, when you talk about Kurt Walker, he is somebody that I would not be shocked to say on Monday comes away victorious. My prediction is Liam Davies, but like I said, I am not 100% certain on this fight. I could see Kurt Walker walking away as a champion here. This is by far Kurt Walker's biggest test, which is why I'm a little bit skeptical as to if he will win this or not. But I think that Kurt Walker is a solid fighter, and I think that Kurt Walker has a chance to pull off the upset here. If I were to say, the most likely outcome would be Liam Davies, but keep an eye on Kurt Walker. I think he's a good prospect. Let's head over to Saturday night now. Emmanuel Navarrete, Charlie Suarez card. This is an interesting fight card. Navarrete's last fight was a loss. However, in that fight, that was when he was trying to move up to 135, and it didn't go so well for him. I think that Emmanuel Navarrete is the guy that I do have on my pound-for-pound list. Obviously, I think I have him right around the tier of, I think it's somewhere, if you were to rank them, it would be 15 to 20 range. However, Emmanuel Navarrete is a great fighter. I think this is going to be easy win for him, mid-round knockout. Charlie Suarez is a fine fighter, but Navarrete, talk about three-division champion. He's going to be defending his WBO belt, and what he does, he's a volume puncher. He knows his angles. He has knockout power. Emmanuel Navarrete is a very good fighter. And Charlie Suarez, I don't want to disrespect him. He's a good fighter. Obviously, he's more technical, solid movement. He's a good fighter. But when you talk about the levels here in play, Charlie Suarez is going to need a miracle to pull off the upset on Emmanuel Navarrete. Straight up. I don't see really a pathway for him to even get a victory here. It's going to be too much pressure. He's going to overwhelm Suarez. I don't see it taking much time. Navarrete should be coming away victorious in the fight. Next fight, co-main event, Raymond Murataya versus Zora Abdulov, IBF interim lightweight title. This is going to be an interesting fight. I personally am very, very high on Raymond Murataya. I feel like this is a guy that's going to be a world champion in the future. So my early prediction here in this fight is that he's going to win. I think it's going to be by decision. I don't see a KO happening in this fight. But I think that Martaya, the way his speed is, his pressure ability, should be the big difference here. I think that both guys are exceptional fighters. By no means is this a fight where I think Martaya is the clear-cut favorite. I think that Zor is going to be a solid fighter. I think he's going to be able to give some pressure, and I'm not going to rule him out for giving him a shot at winning this fight. My just general opinion is that Raymond Martaya is a legitimate, great fighter, is a future world champion. It just does not shock me here. Martaya, obviously, for more details on him, he's a rising American prospect. He has a great explosion and aggressiveness. Now, Abdullah, he's coming off a couple of different wins to rebuild his career, but Martaya has fast hands, relentless work. He's got a high pressure rate. Abdullah is much more composed, strong defense, counter-punching abilities. I just feel like when Martaya wins this fight, I'll be talking to you guys on Monday. I'm going to be bragging about him, saying that this is a man that's going to be one of the next big things in American boxing. He is going to be a future world champion. He is this, that, and the third. I just feel like this is going to be a great performance from Raymond Martaya. So that's my prediction. Raymond Martaya by decision. I just said a few moments ago that there is a fight who I expect to see Emmanuel Navarrete fighting next. It is a man that came on the show a few weeks ago, Andres Cortez. He's fighting Salvador Jimenez. Cortez is going to win by decision, possibly even KO. This is not a fight that's going to be posing much challenge, but what I want to clarify is this. Andres Cortez was supposed to be fighting the man Charlie Swartz, who Emmanuel Navarrete is fighting this weekend, a couple months ago, I think it was back in September of last year. That was supposed to be the fight that occurred. Cortez was unable to fight due to injury and whatnot. He's 100% healthy now, and I feel like we're going to see a great Andres Cortez this upcoming weekend. And when he wins this fight, it sets up a great opportunity for him to become the mandatory to go fight Emmanuel Navarrete for a world championship. That's the plan that he outlined on the show a few weeks ago, and I think it's going to come to fruition. Salvador Jimenez is a solid fighter, but listen, Andres Cortez is a legitimate contender. He's a big fighter, and I think he's the guy that's going to have a world championship shot in the near future. I don't believe that Jimenez is on this level. When we're talking about Andres Cortez, he's one of the top contenders in all of this division, the super featherweight. I don't see this being a fight that's going to be very competitive. I think Andres Cortez gets the win here easily. Then let's head over to another fight happening. Erickson Lubin, Andreo Holmes, junior middleweight IBF title eliminator. Erickson Lubin, obviously we know who he is. A great career at 154. Now, this is going to be his return to the ring. I personally think that Lubin's going to win this by late stoppage. His power should eventually break down. Holmes, I think Holmes is solid, but I don't think that he's on Lubin's level. That being said, we have seen upsets just as recently with Charles Conwell losing his fight just a couple weeks ago. This would not shock me. If he pulls off an upset, Holmes has the capabilities to do just that. But my prediction here is that we're going to have Lubin by late stoppage. I think that Lubin is a great fighter overall. Hard-hitting southpaw, former world title challenger. He's seeking another shot. If he gets this fight, he'll be fighting for a world championship, most likely. Would not shock me to see him get that opportunity. For Holmes, he's a little bit more unknown. However, for details on Holmes, he's an undefeated technician. He has great height and reach advantages in this fight. He also has smart footwork, elusive defense. He's also got the long jab. I think he could frustrate Lubin at times, but overall, Lubin's going to prevail. He's learned. He's been more battle tested. I think Lubin's going to have a title shot in the near future. Let's head over to what will happen on my time early morning Sunday. Fernando Martinez versus Kazuka Ioka 2, the WBA super flyweight title rematch. This is going to be a fun fight. Remember the first one was an exciting fight. Now they get to run it back. My opinion, Puma Martinez will get this win by decision once again. His pressure will be too much. Again, that's my opinion on this fight. I think when you talk about this fight from top to bottom, though, it should be very interesting. Ioka is a veteran champion, very skilled, very experienced. But Puma Martinez, he's relentless, high pressure. He's overwhelming pressure, to be even more specific on that. And he's going to wear his opponents down. I love what Puma Martinez brings to the table. I'm very, very high on him. I think that we're going to see Puma Martinez by victory, by decision against Kazuto Ioka in the rematch. So that's what I've got for you guys in terms of my preview and breakdown of this upcoming weekend's big fights. I will be giving you guys my reaction to everything on Monday's show. I'm going to go on a quick break once again, and then we'll hop into boxing news right after this. See you guys shortly. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker. It's time to get into some boxing topics. And over the past 24 hours, there's been a lot of stuff. So I've got some stuff to get into today, which is why I broke the two different segments up. So let's head into it. First and foremost, Chris Eubank Jr. outlined his next 3 dream fights, and I like them. In fact, at least the first 2 are ones that I've already suggested and I think would have happened. But let's get to it now. First and foremost, he wants the Conor Benn rematch. I've said this time and time again. That makes the most sense. The only 2 ways that was going to happen is if for some reason Canelo fought Chris Eubank Jr. in September opposed to Terrence Bud Crawford. And on the other side, if Conor Benn or if Ryan Garcia would have went out there and had a dominant performance and potentially would have had Ryan Garcia versus Conor Benn. Conor Benn is not going to be fighting Ryan Garcia now. He already made that very clear after Ryan Garcia has come apart. And then you go obviously over to Canelo and Bud Crawford, that was already happening. So their next fight will be against each other. I think that when you talk about the financial ability, you talk about how big it's going to be, the legacies on the line, how good the first fight was. That fight was bound to happen. I see that coming to fruition. I like that idea. Then Chris Eubank Jr. wants to go fight Canelo Alvarez, which makes a lot more sense. You could have that fight be on May of 2026 against Canelo Alvarez on Cinco de Mayo weekend. That's the fight I most likely see coming to fruition, and I think what we're going to see have happen. But then he throws a little bit of a curveball there for the third one. His dream fight is a rematch with Billy Joe Saunders. I didn't really see that one coming. I see why he wants it. It makes sense. But I did not see that fight being the one that he would actually want at this stage of his career. You know, going from the Conor Benn to Canelo Alvarez to Billy Joe Saunders, who's obviously been retired now for a couple years. But I see why he wants it, and obviously it would sell very, very well. So that's who Chris Eubank Jr. has mapped out as his next 3 fights, and I'm all on board with that. The only thing I would say is that, you know, if he wants to go pursue world championships beyond just Canelo Alvarez, obviously someone other than Billy Joe Saunders would be on the table there. However, if Canelo's what he wants, he would have all the belts anyways. It would make sense. I think it all would set up perfectly. So I'm all for that. Update on some other fight news. Anthony Yarde, Callum Smith, WBO interim light heavyweight belt title bout is being worked on to take place in Saudi Arabia in August as part of the Matchroomers Queensberry 5v5. I like that fight. It makes sense. Callum Smith should easily get that victory there. Although, like I always would say about Anthony Yarde, Anthony Yarde has the potential to go out and be a dominant force in the light heavyweight division. But I feel like he has held himself back so far. I feel like there's so much untapped potential. Whereas Callum Smith has proven himself. He is in great shape. The way he looked in his last fight was phenomenal. And I think that Callum Smith would easily get that win there. What I would have liked to see have happen is Callum Smith versus David Benavidez. That's a fight I'd love to see. I think that fight would make plenty of sense. I think it'd be a great fight. But hey, if we're going to have Callum Smith for Anthony Yarde, I'm not going to be complaining about that. I think the winner of that fight would then set themselves up to fight either David Benavidez or the winner of Bivol versus Better BF3. That's what I think could happen there. I have a question to ask, though. I went into this a little bit yesterday in regards to Devin Haney and my appreciation for the fact that he still wants to make the rematch happen with Ryan Garcia. But I did not emphasize whether or not I want that fight to happen. And I spent some time pondering after yesterday's show, would I like to see and should the Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia rematch still happen? The initial reaction and answer to that is no. At least for the time being. But at the same time, that's a fight that needs to happen at some point. While Ryan Garcia contractually screwed up the entire fight by losing, Devin Haney has made it clear that he still wants to fight Ryan Garcia. Even with anything happening, he still wants that rematch and get back. And I respect Devin Haney a ton for that. I think that speaks measures to the type of fight Devin Haney is and the type of person that Devin Haney is. That he wants that rematch and that get back now. But at the same time, doesn't make sense where obviously Devin Haney is not coming off the best performance and Ryan Garcia is coming off of an abysmal performance. Would that fight make sense? And after I thought about this, I came to the conclusion that actually it would make sense to have happen next. And you might ask, well, why would you say that? My reasoning behind this is, listen, both guys did not come off of brilliant performances. But you do know for a fact that both guys have each other on their minds. Devin Haney knows that, yes, he still has a 0 on his record, but he knows what happened in that fight. At the same time, Ryan Garcia knows that he needs to get back from not only the Rolly Romero fight, but also the PED accusations. Obviously, everything regarding around the PED situation, he wants to prove that he can still fight at that level. And I feel like neither guy is going to fully be able to move on in their boxing careers until they get that rematch made. And yes, my initial response to that was no, I don't want to see the rematch right now. It's pushed away. But now that Devin Haney has said that he wants the rematch, and I start thinking about that, all of a sudden that idea of the rematch makes a lot more sense to me. Because for Ryan Garcia, outside of just a simple tune-up fight, I don't know what else makes sense for him. And it's the same thing for Devin Haney. There's options on the table. Don't get me wrong, Devin Haney is still a great fighter. And I made that clear yesterday. But is there anything that's going to still equate to the level of money that they could bring in, the revenue, than the Ryan Garcia Devin Haney fight? I don't think so. It won't be as big as it could have been prior to the performances on Friday. But I still think that rematch needs to be made. And Bob Arum said something interesting. He said he believes that Devin Haney is gun shy and afraid of getting punched hard. And that's why Bob Arum favors Raleigh over Haney if they were to fight next. Now, that's something for another time in terms of the Raleigh situation. Do I think Raleigh beat Devin Haney? I don't know. The way that Devin Haney fought, his resistance to the punch and the way he decided to go out there against Jose Ramirez was not very good. I still feel like he's too skilled to go out there and lose to Raleigh Romero, but that's something I would have to think about that fight even comes to fruition. What I want to say there is why I mentioned that in this segment was because I do think that's a problem. And I personally don't believe that Devin Haney will be able to move on. I think it was clear. He definitely was gunshot. I think he was nervous to get hit. I think it was also a mixture of rust, also a mixture of just ring inactivity and stuff like that. But I do believe that Devin Haney, if he can go out there and he can defeat Ryan Garcia in a fight, that would do wonders for his career from a mental standpoint. From a actual accolades, resume standpoint would be great. But from a mental standpoint, which is what you need as a boxer, that would be huge for him. Knowing that he can overcome Ryan Garcia, knowing that he can overcome the left hook, knowing that he can overcome and he got the defeat, he got his revenge, I think that would do wonders for Devin Haney moving forward. And that is why I do believe that if this fight were to be made next, it actually does make a lot of sense. Now, it wouldn't shock me if they still go through this process and say, okay, both guys get another fight or two in before they make it. But my honest opinion is that the rematch needs to happen. And if it happens next for both guys, I'm no longer against that. I actually am in favor of that. And that's mostly due to the fact that Devin Haney wants that fight. He held up to his part of the bargain and he got the win on Friday. And if he still wants to make that fight, they need to make that fight happen. Another thing, Raleigh Romero said an interesting fact. Raleigh Romero said he called out promoters for paying boxers too much money. It was this little segment about a minute and a half, but just sum it up. He says this, it's sad. It's really messing up the sport. You got to do it like the UFC does. Now, that's controversial, and I'm a little bit surprised he said that. I think he's been taking a lot of shots at Turkey over the past couple of days. However, what I want to see with Raleigh Romero in this situation is this. I personally am torn on this because on one aspect in terms of the branding and fighting, the way that UFC does work is the UFC does have guys where essentially they are forced to fight. There's not a lot of waiting around. Now, yes, you have John Jones. John Jones is an exception. McGregor is an exception. But generally speaking, for everybody that's not in that superstar tier caliber, for boxing terms, let's say Canelo Alvarez obviously would be in that top tier. The likes of an Anthony Joshua, those guys that have just these bigger than life brands, those guys would be your Conor McGregor's, John Jones comparisons. But everybody else in the UFC is forced to fight mandated fighters. And they're not going to get paid a ton of money. They're all paid relatively low in comparison. Now, the champions do get paid a little bit more. We know there's money that gets paid underneath the table and stuff. But generally speaking, that's how it happens. And I think that's what Raleigh Romero is talking about in this statement. What Raleigh Romero is saying is that there's so much money involved that, one, promoters can't afford to pay these guys to keep them fighting and active. And two, it's so much money that's messing up the mentality of fighters going into this fight. And I suggested this point the other day when I said, okay, we have noticed that on some of these Turkey Al-Sheikh cards, that guys are not showing up in the best level. Now, not always. Maybe that's clear. But I feel like some guys that when you get paid a certain amount of money, and we're talking, million plus US dollars, your mentality does shift. It's very, very hard to take a punch and go to work and get a beating when you are getting paid handsomely. It's a lot easier to go out there and grind out a win and victory when you're trying to do it for money, you need money. But when you have that bag secured, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So what I want to go out there and say is Raleigh Romero probably right? Yes. But we must remember this for boxing. When we talk about the game of boxing, it is an entertainment. It is fun. It is my favorite sport to watch and cover. At the same time, these guys are not fighting just for entertainment. This is their livelihood. This is their jobs. Them pulling in the revenue that they pull in is A-okay with me. I understand that, yes, it makes it a little bit more confusing, complicated for boxing fans. But we have to remember, these guys are not just going out there taking punches just for fun. This isn't gladiator games or something along those lines. This is a lifestyle and a livelihood for these guys. And so, no, I'm not going to complain about the money. Overall, Turkey Al-Sheikh is good for boxing from that standpoint. He is getting guys paid, and I'm not going to be against that. Although it does impact, Raleigh is right, it does impact the way the fighters think, and it does impact the way and the amount of fights that are getting made in boxing. Fighters still need to make their money, and I'm not going to complain about guys getting the bag. All right. Actually, I'm going to do a quick look before I go into the rest of the segments. I want to turn up on this on Rem. I appreciate your comments, and thank you for tuning into the interview as well. Appreciate all your support as always. But yes, going back to that Navarrete component, absolutely. I think when you talk about Navarrete, he is underrated in my opinion. Emmanuel Navarrete is somebody that he challenged himself, obviously going up to fight Dennis Birchenek, and that was a fight that, it could have gone either way. It was a fine fight, but, 135 was probably pushing it. Maybe we see him try it again in the future, but no. The uppercuts he throws are definitely insane. I mean, Navarrete is a guy, as I said, when I do my pound for pound tiers, which are updated on Monday, I have him right up in there. Essentially, if you were to rank them out by people, I do it by tiers. He would be somewhere in that 15 to 20 range. And I don't think he gets the respect that he deserves. I think it's because he's obviously he's not a massive, massive brand. But no, Emmanuel Navarrete is a problem. When you talk about guys at 130, is it possible it's boxing he could get defeated? But it's going to be very tough to beat him. And so I think he's going to walk right through Charlie Suarez without any issues. Andres Cortez would be an interesting fight. I think he easily gets past him, who would likely be next opponent. And then you talk about unifying with some guys. I think that should happen in the future. But no, Emmanuel Navarrete is a problem. I think 130, he could probably get through just about anybody. But his biggest challenge to see if he could ever get through it would be 135. But no, I mean, even at 130, now that I think about it, O'Shaquie Foster would be a very good fight, actually. I think that would actually be a good test for him. A hypothetical Lamont Roach fight could be good, but I think Lamont Roach will be at 135 going forward. The tank money is going to be too much. He's going to get showing that he can fight at 135. So we'll see. But no, Navarrete is a great, great fighter. No doubt about that. And as I always like to say, though, for anybody tuning into the show, go ahead and leave some comments. I'll always will go and make sure in between segments that I'll go address comments. We're going to have some conversation on the show. Definitely. Just make sure you leave comments. I'll address those as soon as I'm on a little bit of a break. Let's get back to some other things I have planned up for now. All right. July 19th. Book your calendars, folks. This is going to be an exceptional day for boxing. It is going to be massive. And why do I say that? Well, let me say a few different things. I have been quite particular in terms of my opinions on the Manny Pacquiao fight. I do not like the fact that Manny Pacquiao is fighting from just an overall standpoint of his age, what he's gone through this point in time, the wear and tear, being 46 years old, not looking good at his expedition fight, so on and so forth. I think it's a disgrace to boxing. I don't like the Mario Barrios versus Manny Pacquiao fight at all. However, what I'm interested in seeing now is that the paper is now supposed to be a pay-per-view card. And what I'm interested in seeing now is the way this card comes and is built underneath it. Here is what we've been rumoring to this point. Pacquiao, Mario Barrios will headline the fight card. Sebastian Fundora, Tim Tszyu rematch will be as the co-main event. Potentially Carlos Adames versus Janibek as another fight on that card, which I don't think that's going to happen on that card. I'd be shocked. That's the rumors. I just don't think it's going to happen, but that would be huge. That's one of the best fights to make in boxing right now, in my opinion. And then Gary Antoine Russell, Andy Hirashaka are also rumored to be on that fight card. We're talking about 4 world championship fights on the same night. And mind you, on that same night, Pumilele Kafu and Bam Rodriguez are also supposed to be fighting each other. So we're talking about having 5 world championship fights, and also on the undercard, Diego Pacheco, Trevor McCumbee too. We're talking about a massive night of boxing. Now, my personal opinion would be to see that fight possibly get moved, the Bam Rodriguez card, get moved to Friday so that we don't have them all compiled in one night. I think it's going to be very, very tough. It's going to do damage to the numbers for Bam Rodriguez, his publicity, and all those different things. So I would like to see that fight get moved to a Friday. We'll see if that ends up coming to fruition. But no, that will be absolutely insane. I think it's going to be a great fight to possibly make. And it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But no, when you talk about just what that fight could bring to the table that day would be huge. And, also we have the same time span. You're going to have Daniel Dubois versus Alexander Usyk, which is also going to be huge as well. So a lot of things on the table here, but that's going to be huge. And I'm trying to think right now because let me look at the date for this. Yeah. So no, they're going to be the same day. That's why I just realized this. Yes, we're going to be having Daniel Dubois, Alexander Usyk, undisputed rematch heavyweight at Wembley Stadium the same exact day. That's going to actually be insane. I didn't even click until right now. So no, we will be having potentially Daniel Dubois, Alexander Usyk in that card, Manny Pacquiao's card with all the fights I just listed, and on top of that, Bam Rodriguez versus Kafu. That would actually be an absolutely insane fight to make. So we'll see how that fight card's going to come to fruition. I'm going to go on one more quick break, and then I'm going to see you guys right after this break and wrap the show. See you guys shortly. Welcome back, everyone, to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker. So, before the break, I was talking about July 19th, and I wanted to go make sure I did some research again to make sure I clarified that because it did not click for me up until that point when I realized the July 19th date, and I thought for myself, wait a second, I know there's another fight on that day, and it is Daniel Dubois versus Alexander Usyk. be having their undisputed heavyweight championship fight at Wembley Stadium on July 19th. So can I give you guys a preview real quickly? We just had what was hyped up to be an incredible weekend when you had the Times Square card, you had Riyadh Season Canelo Alvarez, and the Naoya Inoue fight card on Sunday. Now we're talking about July 19th. Mark your calendars, because we're going to have Daniel Dubois versus Alexander Usyk, that undisputed heavyweight world championship fight at Wembley Stadium, happening in the UK early morning time or afternoon time in the United States. And then we're going to head over to the United States prime time, and you're going to have potentially this Manny Pacquiao card, which as of now has been rumored could be Manny Pacquiao versus Mario Barrios, Sebastian Fundora versus Tim Tszyu, Carlos Adames versus Jana Beck, and Gary Antoine Russell versus Andy Hirosaka. On top of that, we also will be having a card featuring Bam Rodriguez versus Pumile Kafu unification at 115, as well as an undercard that features Diego Pacheco, Trevor McCumbee. And we also know that the Daniel Dubois versus Alexander Usyk card is Riyadh Season card. Therefore, you can only imagine that Turki Al-Sheikh is going to be stacking that undercard as well. We're talking about a massive day of boxing July 19th. Preferably, I would not be shocked, and I would honestly kind of hope that Matchroom moves the Pumile Kafu and Bam Rodriguez fight to Friday to open up space so things don't overlap. I'm never a big fan of that at all. So we'll see what happens there. But regardless, the weekend of July 19th will be a massive day for boxing. Absolutely phenomenal. That's something to mark your calendars, because if you're a boxing fan, July 19th is going to be a day that you're not going to want to book anything else. That is a beautiful looking day of boxing. Let's get into some of the topics that I got planned for today. Turki Al-Sheikh has said that he wants to make Keyshawn Davis versus Teofimo Lopez next at 140 if Keyshawn beats Edwin De Los Santos and if Teofimo accepts. I don't like this fight at all. I really, really don't. Listen, here's why. When we talk about Keyshawn Davis, I know the move to 140 is inevitable. He's going to be moving up eventually. Edwin De Los Santos, I think he's going to get past him. It should not be too much of a problem. I expect an early KO in that fight. But I want to see Keyshawn Davis make his move at 135. Now, a big hindrance there is that I get it. Keyshawn Davis will not be fighting Shakur Stevenson. Therefore, you have two guys, Shakur and Keyshawn Davis, who I both think want to fight Tank Davis, but I don't think that feeling is mutual on Tank Davis' behalf. Therefore, we're not going to likely see Tank Davis versus either one of those guys anytime soon. We're not going to see Shakur versus Keyshawn Davis. So, from that standpoint, I get why Keyshawn will move to 140 maybe a little bit earlier than he has to. However, does Teofimo Lopez make sense right away? Or should Keyshawn Davis go up to 140, make his ground, go for a belt, something along those lines first and foremost? There's obviously guys they could go out there and beat, and then go for unification with Teofimo Lopez. That might make more sense. But Teofimo versus Keyshawn Davis could be a rough outing. I think Teofimo has it on that end. I would like to see Keyshawn Davis get that victory. I like the way Keyshawn Davis fights. I respect Keyshawn Davis. Teofimo Lopez is just a problem, and he's accustomed to 140. I think that would be too quick of a transition for Keyshawn Davis. However, I would hope he gets that victory. But I just don't see that happening right out the gate. So I'm not a big fan of that, but that's what Turki Al-Sheikh wants to make, so we'll see what happens there. Top Ring executive Carl Moretti tells the ring that he's unsure if Vasily Lomachenko will fight again. The IBF previously told the ring that Lomachenko has until October 8th to make a defense of his lightweight title, and the sanctioning body is set to order him to fight the winner of Raymond Murataya versus Zohar Abdulov on August 8th if he still remains uncommitted. Listen, for most people, they're not going to get this long of an extension. Now, it's right. Don't get it twisted. Lomachenko has an injury and so on and so forth. It gave him the exception. It is what it is. And if anybody deserves that, it is Lomachenko. He's earned the right to be able to take a little bit of a time off. Obviously, he fought now almost 1 year ago. It was the last time he stepped in the ring. So him getting this much time to make a decision is confusing. It's I don't want to say confusing. It's disappointing. It keeps the division held up. At the same time, he does kind of deserve it. But that's the deadline. If Lomachenko wants to return to the ring or not, we will see. I personally think it's time for him to retire. When you are a fighter and you're 1 foot out the door, it's never smart to go back and fight again. This is your livelihood, and he's already got the money. He's got everything he needs. Don't come back and fight if you're 1 foot out the door already. However, that does open the door, though. I think Raymond Murataya is going to be world champion in the future. I already said this earlier in the show. So that would be interesting to have him moved up into that group. And at that point, then if it happens, then that would make more sense for Keyshawn Davis unification fight. Seeing those two guys go at it. Two young guys. I would love to see that fight happen. So a lot of moving pieces here. But Lomachenko is officially on the clock. He's going to have to make his decision shortly. Final one I want to say, Rolly Romero once again made an interesting statement. He says that he has told the ring and other reporters that he would prefer to face Manny Pacquiao over Jon Boots Ennis, as it would be a bigger legacy fight for him. Rolly is an interesting guy, to say the least. And I see the point. Obviously, Manny Pacquiao all-time great. Manny Pacquiao is a legend. I want to make that clear because I feel like some people are confusing some of my other posts. Manny Pacquiao is an all-time great. There's no disrespecting Manny Pacquiao. But Manny Pacquiao is also 46 years old. He has not won a fight since 2019. That Manny Pacquiao that we all know who he's going to fight is not the very same Manny Pacquiao as prime Pacquiao. It's not quite to the extent of what Jake Paul and Mike Tyson was, but I mean, it is similar. It's definitely a similarity between the two of them. I'm not a big fan of it at all. And I think that when you talk about that, if you're going after for a payday, that makes sense. But if you're going after Manny Pacquiao just to go fight him right now because you think it's going to be a bigger legacy fight, then no. Because let me ask you this. Is a 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao more valuable than a John Boots Ennis in his prime? I don't really think so. Now, is Manny Pacquiao's name much bigger, much more significant, much more accomplished, higher up in the hierarchy of boxing, and will always be probably higher than John Boots Ennis? Of course. But you have to put into realization what Manny Pacquiao Raleigh would face. So from that standpoint, I don't really know the answer there, but it would be interesting. Could you imagine a world championship fight between Raleigh Romero and Manny Pacquiao in either 2025 or 2026? That would be an insane fight to make. Only boxing could give you something that outlandish and that crazy. That being said, though, I appreciate you guys all for tuning into today's show. That's all I've got for you guys on the SchuZ Show on this great Friday. May you guys have a blessed rest of your Friday. Have an incredible weekend. I will see you guys on Monday. I'll give you guys a recap of everything that happened. I got 2 weeks planned for Monday night. I can't wait to see you guys on Monday. May God bless you guys all. SchuZ is out.